Welcome back to Citizen One, exploring our urban future. I'm Douglas Stewart McDaniel. This is part 2 of a 3-part Citizen One miniseries about Barcelona and my neighborhood. I was walking to the market the other day, and just 2 blocks from where I live, there's an archaeological excavation underway here in El Raval. I pass it now often enough that it's become part of my daily geography rather than an event. There's a fenced rectangle of disturbed ground and archaeologists at work. I talk to them sometimes. I can't record them because it's a city project and they don't want to speak for the city. But the construction on this area has paused for these architects, but not stalled. The city doing what it does when you ask it to improve itself. This started as a straightforward public space project. The Jardin del Dr. Fleming and Plaza de la Gardenia are being upgraded. New paving, lighting, benches, a play area that will immediately be folded into neighborhood life. It's not cosmetic, it's functional. Families in El Raval need public space that works, and they need it without apology. This is not just an area for tourists, but for locals as well. But what makes this site interesting isn't the renovation, it's the predictability of what emerged once the pavement came up. Barcelona expects archaeology. It plans for it. The ground here is not neutral territory and hasn't been for 2,000 years. It's a record, and every infrastructure project knows it may have to read a few pages before proceeding. At Fleming, the pages belong to the hospital city. Burials associated with the Hospital de la Santa Cruz, dating to the 17th and 18th centuries, the cemetery known as El Corralat. By July 2025, archaeologists had documented 18 burial units here containing 25 individuals, men, women, children. In the northern section, the older burials were simple, bodies placed without even coffins. The unclaimed poor, the ones who died at the edge of care. In the southern section, 18th century burials showed a certain dignity. Wooden coffins, bodies buried clothed, rosaries and medals still present, arms folded in supine position. Someone had arranged them properly. Someone had cared enough, even for the abandoned. These were the ones whose relationship to the city was transactional and final, and whose remains now slow the installation of playground equipment and gardens because the city has decided they are worth documenting before the children arrive to play. There's nothing anomalous about that. This is the same Barcelona that uncovered a Roman necropolis along Plaza de la Vila de Madrid and folded it calmly into the street. The same city that rebuilt Mercat de Sant Antoni directly over a Roman road junction and let the market resume on top of it. The same city that excavated the industrial core of Roman Barcino beneath Plaza del Rey and decided it was worth keeping visible, not because it was imperial, but because it was productive. Barcelona's archaeology rarely delivers emperors. It delivers infrastructure, roads, workshops, markets, cemeteries, the systems that allow people to live, work, and eventually disappear. But the Fleming site is only the most local example. In the past year and a half, Barcelona and Catalonia have produced 3 other exciting archaeological finds that extend the same pattern. And collectively, they make an argument the city has never quite stated out loud. Just 10 minutes walk from the Fleming site at the foot of La Rambla, where it meets the port, there's a building that looks like it was designed to make you feel small. The Drassanes Real, the Royal Shipyards, now the Maritime Museum, is a sequence of Gothic stone naves running parallel to the sea, each one roughly 60 meters long, tall enough to contain a ship under construction with room for the rigging and masts above it. And not just one, but 16 of them, built between the 13th and 16th centuries for one purpose: to produce warships for the Crown of Aragon at industrial scale. At its peak in 1423, 12 galleys could be built simultaneously inside those naves. 12 full warships, side by side under one roof, being planked and caulked and rigged in parallel. The materials were sourced with the precision of a supply chain. Ashlar stone from Montjuic, sand from the beach directly in front of the building, timber from the Baix Ebre and the Gavares, and tile from Valencia. The sea was close enough that finished ships could be launched directly into it, like out of a Henry Ford factory. The Drassanes was not a monument to craftsmanship, it was a factory. Barcelona's medieval answer to mass production applied to the tools of Mediterranean empire. In 1571, the flagship Real was built here, 60 meters long, 236 oarsmen, its prow decorated with Neptune riding a dolphin, its stern carrying a triple lantern symbolizing faith, hope, and charity. It led the Holy League to victory over the Ottoman fleet at Lepanto. A full-scale reproduction now fills the central nave of the museum. But the Drossanes also teaches something else if you let it. The same institution that built the galley that won Lepanto fell completely out of use within 2 centuries. Shipbuilding largely moved to Cartagena. The naves became a barracks, then an artillery foundry, then a cannon depot. The building that had launched the Western Mediterranean's most powerful war fleet spent most of the 18th and 19th centuries making guns for an army that had nothing to do with the sea. Then the city got it back in 1935 and turned it into a museum. But when they excavated beneath it during the 2012 restoration, they found a Roman necropolis. 25 graves, medieval, underneath the Gothic factory that built the ships that made the empire. Barcelona's maritime history does not hold still. Which brings us up to their recent find in April of 2025, 3 kilometers up the coast on the former site of the Mercat de Peix near the Ciutadella, which feels less like a surprise than a completion of the story. Construction crews excavating for a new biomedical research complex broke through into another medieval shipwreck. They named it Ciutadella Uno. 10 meters long, 3 meters wide, built of 30 curved wooden ribs and at least 7 hull planks held together with wooden dowels and iron nails. Standard Mediterranean skeleton frame construction, mid-15th century. A merchant vessel, most likely, sunk in a storm, the lead archaeologist believes, when this section of the city that it now lies under was still open water. That last detail matters. The ship is 5 meters below the current ground surface because Barcelona's coastline moved. After the city built its first artificial docks in 1439, the old sandbar that had defined the harbor shifted and the sea receded. The city grew forward over its own port, and the ship became sediment. The sediment became a fish market. The fish market became a construction site and now a biomedical research facility. And now the construction site has paused because the wreck's waterlogged timbers are so fragile they must be kept continuously wet to prevent collapse. Dismantled piece by piece, 3-dimensionally modeled by photogrammetry, each plank analyzed for wood type and resin chemistry to determine where exactly it was built. And there is a line connecting the Drossanes and the Ciutadella Uno site that runs not through glory but through labor. Yes, the Drossanes built ships for kings and admirals. Ciutadella Uno carried cargo, goods moving between ports on the trade routes the Aragonese Empire had opened and the galley fleets had kept safe. The factory and the freighter, the warship and the workhorse. The museum at the foot of La Rambla holds the reproduction of the famous one. The ground beneath a future research facility holds the kind of ship that actually made the city's economy run. What makes Ciutadella Uno remarkable is not the ship itself, it's the stratigraphic sandwich around it. That single 7,000 square meter excavation contains the remains of the 18th century Bourbon citadel fortifications, the structure of the 19th century fish market, a Civil War air raid shelter built in 1938 to protect the market's workers from nationalist bombings, and a 15th century vessel that predates all of it. 5 centuries of Barcelona stacked in one pit, the city's entire modern biography compressed into a construction delay. The first medieval ship found in Barcelona, Barceloneta Uno, excavated in 2008 near the França station, turned out to be Cantabrian in origin, a northern vessel in a southern port. It now lives in the Barcelona History Museum. Ciutadella Uno is Mediterranean-built, a local design. Together, they document the diversity of what moved through this port when Barcelona was one of the great commercial nodes of the Western Mediterranean. We now have 2 examples of perfectly documented naval construction in the city of Barcelona, said Santi Palacios, one of the lead archaeologists. He describes it calmly the way a librarian notes the collection as a new acquisition. The Drossanes still stands, those 16 naves, Gothic stones. The metro station outside is named after the building, Drossanes, the Catalan word for shipyard, because the city has accepted that it is simply part of the vocabulary now. You get on the train at the shipyard, the way in other cities you get on at the cathedral or the market, walk through it on a quiet Tuesday morning before the tour groups arrive, and you can almost feel the geometry of the thing, what it meant to be a city that could fill these halls with ships in parallel, supply a fleet from local stone and regional timber, and project itself across the sea. What the ground underneath the old fish market gave back in April 2025 was a piece of the ordinary machinery of that world, not the flagship, the freighter. And now let's move on to the next exciting archaeological site here in Barcelona. But before I do that, I got to tell you a little story. In 218 BCE, there was a Roman general named Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio who landed his army on the coast of what is now Catalonia and marched toward an Iberian town called Kisa. The Carthaginian commander Hanno, left behind by Hannibal to hold territory north of the Ebro River, chose to fight rather than wait for reinforcements. He was outnumbered 2-1. He lost. The Romans sacked the town, captured Hanno himself, and found that Hannibal's baggage, everything he'd left behind before crossing the Alps, was stored there. They took that too. The Battle of Sissa, as it's known to history, was the first engagement Rome ever fought on Iberian soil. It established the Roman foothold in what would become Hispania. It cut Hannibal's supply lines and denied him the reinforcements that might have tipped the Second Punic War. Some historians have called it, without excessive exaggeration, one of the decisive engagements of the ancient Mediterranean world. And for 2,000 years, nobody knew exactly where Sissa was. But here in 2025, a team from the University of Barcelona confirmed it. Weiss in the Camp de Tarragona at the Vilar archaeological site. The evidence is unambiguous. Punic coins concentrated in a destruction layer, lead ballista projectiles inside burned houses, a stratigraphic sequence consistent with violent demolition in the fall of 218 BCE. The location of dozens of Punic coins in Weiss can only be related to the presence of Carthaginian troops during those few months in 218 BCE when they were north of the Ebro, said Jaume Noguera, who has led excavations at the site since 2014. The geography confirms it. Weiss controls the pass from the coast toward the interior of Catalonia. It was and remains a bottleneck. When Roman troops marched south toward Tarraco, what is now Tarragona, they would have had to go through here. The city was not abandoned immediately after the Roman assault. It continued for another 10 to 20 years before finally being depopulated. People still trying to live in the rubble of a place that had become a footnote in someone else's war. What the Weiss confirmation offers is not primarily a tourist attraction, though Noguera hopes the land will become public and the site visitable. What it offers is a different kind of correction. Catalonia's ground was not a passive stage for Rome's arrival. It was the site where the contest was decided. The first Roman battle in Iberia happened in a town with a market, and a cemetery, and people going on about their ordinary lives. The coins and the ballista balls are the only things that mark the afternoon. It all changed. And another much more recent archaeological find here in Barcelona that's really exciting is in December 2025, construction teams preparing the ground for the new La Sagrera high-speed rail station for the AVE connection linking Barcelona, Madrid, and France to the rest of the European network broke into something that wasn't on any map. It was a Civil War air raid shelter built around 1937. Was never listed in the 1938 census of public shelters after the war. Not recorded anywhere in the official documentation of Barcelona's wartime civil defense network, which means it was private. And given the location directly beneath the former La Sagrera freight station, which the CNT, or Confederación Nacional del Trabajo, the anarcho-syndicate railway workers union, had collectivized after the Republican victory in 1936, it means the workers built it themselves, for themselves, without asking permission. The structure is unlike any other shelter found in Barcelona. Most of the city's roughly 1,322 documented wartime shelters were dug directly into the earth. Tunnels carved into hillsides or adapted from basements and sewers. The La Sagrera shelter is different, excavated in the open air, then built as a poured concrete bunker before being buried under fill. The engineers gave it a reinforced concrete roof slab 2 meters thick, calculated specifically to withstand the impact of 100-kilogram bombs. That's pretty remarkable for a grassroots anarchist labor union. The freight station was a known target, bombed twice in 1937, handling military logistics for the Republican government, and the workers knew exactly what was coming and built accordingly. Inside, two main galleries, 2.5 meters high and 1.2 meters wide, running north-south to connect two buildings at the station entrance. 4 large rooms, 4 latrines, space that may have served as an infirmary. Total length approximately 90 meters, and on the walls, graffiti. The initials of the CNT and the FIE, Federación Anarquista Ibérica, the Iberian Anarchist Federation, and dates, some of them from as late as 1954. 15 years after the war ended, 6 years into the Franco dictatorship, people were still using the space, or at least still marking it, or perhaps sheltering in it again for different reasons, in a different kind of fear. This discovery is currently being documented by laser scanning. What happens to it next, whether it gets preserved, incorporated into the new station design, or sealed under the tracks, hasn't been fully decided. But the find itself is already a document. It tells you something specific about 1937 Barcelona that the archives had missed. That the people who kept the trains moving also knew the trains would make them targets, and so they dug their survival out of the ground with their own hands before anyone could stop them. The high-speed AVE railway to Madrid will run eventually over the exact spot where those workers hid. Taken together, the hospital cemetery in El Raval, the medieval freighter ship under the fish market, the Iberian city that witnessed the Roman invasion, and the anarchist bunker under the railway. What emerges is not a collection of curiosities. It's a pattern. What I find notable about each of these sites is how little drama surrounds any of them. Archaeologists work, sites are documented, remains are treated properly, construction timelines adjust and then resume. No panic, no spectacle, no false choice between memory and improvement. This is not Barcelona discovering its past. It's Barcelona managing it well. The same competence was on display at El Born when an entire 18th century neighborhood was preserved in place, not to beautify history, but to acknowledge consequence. The same approach appears every time Via Laietana is disturbed and medieval walls reassert themselves. The city doesn't recoil, it adapts and adjusts. When the Jardin del Dr. Fleming reopened, children will play there soon. Neighbors will sit. The space will feel calmer and safer. None of that is undermined by what lay beneath it. It was a photo shoot going on for a car brand there nearby today. If anything, it's strengthened. This is a city that understands that improvement doesn't require amnesia, that public space can be both functional and deep. Barcelona doesn't have to freeze its archaeology behind glass unless it chooses to. More often, it absorbs it into daily life. You walk past Roman roads and ruins on your way to buy groceries. You sit above medieval houses without thinking about them. You drink coffee over the industrial remains of a wine city that predates the language you're speaking. 2 blocks from my apartment, that pattern is playing out again. And in Valls and in the Ciutadella and under the future AVE platforms of La Sagrera, it's playing out again too. Quietly, competently, without self-congratulation. The ground speaks, the city listens just long enough, and then it continues, better informed. That's not tension, that's a city at ease with its own history. Thanks for joining this very special episode. Archaeology and the city and what it means to its residents is an important topic for me. As part of Citizen One, exploring our urban future, I'm your host, Douglas Stewart McDaniel, and we'll see you again soon.